Hey art nerds, so when Arrtx asked me to take another look at a different set of their acrylic markers, this time a brush tip, I said yes because I had so much fun playing around with Arrtx's acrylic markers the last time, and I'd been kind of scoping out their brush tip markers for a while, both on TikTok and on Amazon. So when their Simptap acrylic markers arrived, I just knew I had to share them with you guys. While I open this heavily packaged package, I'll tell you guys about Lilliputian Living. So I'm in my 8th year of Lilliputian Living. It is a world building challenge that explores the miniature world, so tiny people who are 7 inches tall. And I am about to finish up the second book. So the first book, Lilliputian Living, the Compendium of Miniature Life, has been out for a few years, and we are about to self-publish Les Petits Plaisirs de la Vie, the Little Pleasures in Life. Pretty fitting. This final Lilliputian Living is about milestones and festivities, so celebrating the big parts in tiny lives. And every day I pick a prompt from a prompt list that I wrote for myself. I don't necessarily share, I don't not share, but I don't share it expecting other people to draw along with me. I share it just to share it because it's a personal art challenge to explore kind of the world building of the 7-inch Caro world, right? So if you like whimsical things, if you like mushrooms, if you like Hobbit core, if you like Goblin core, anything like that, you'll really like Lilliputian Living, and I hope you'll check it out. I have been sharing it on all my favorite social media every day. So if you're already a subscriber here, you've probably seen some of it. I've been sharing it on YouTube and Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and Blue Sky. Although I have to admit, Threads is not my favorite. Blue Sky trumps Threads on that. And it basically takes priority in the month of October because we're preparing to release a second book. And the only reason we have not released our second book is because I'm still drawing that final chapter in it. And this is my last Lilliputian Living. I'm going to move on to other challenges. So it's bittersweet for me. So I know what this is now. Arrtx asked me if I would be interested in taking a look at more of their acrylic markers. I had so much fun with the last set that I said sure. So this was sent to me care of. So I'm going to do a video with you guys, and then I'll probably do some short form videos over on TikTok and on YouTube Shorts. And I'll probably come up with a few different projects that those of you, whether you have these markers or not, can work along with me. And I'll probably be working on this throughout October. The last time I reviewed acrylic markers from Arrtx, I did many projects. I don't know if I'm going to be that ambitious. We will see. It kind of depends on my health and, you know, how Lilliputian Living is going. So they did not pay me to do this. I did this of my own volition. They sent me the Simptap acrylic marker set. This is their saturated colors set. This is what the back looks like. They also sent me a sketchbook. This is a nice heavy sketchbook, my goodness. And this is mixed pulp, so it's a cellulose. It might even be cellulose cotton, but it is probably just cellulose. And this is for drawing pencils, sketching pencils, colored pencils, and markers. And this was distributed in the UK by Kova Associates. In the EC, it's C&E Connection. And this is an Arrtx product. And we reviewed a few Arrtx products here on the channel. These are the markers. These are Simptap markers. And how many are in here? These are waterproof and have a brush tip, strong coverage and bright, available on various surfaces. This is 48 saturated colors. Be interesting to see how this compares against the other Arrtx acrylic markers I have received. Now, I have reviewed a lot of alcohol markers over the years here and over on my old blog. In fact, that's how a lot of people used to know me. Now I primarily review watercolor products, but I have been really excited to play around with acrylic markers because it's something new and it's kind of in my wheelhouse, but kind of not in my wheelhouse. And it makes something that I've struggled with in the past, acrylic painting. I used to hate acrylic painting. I took one acrylic painting class in undergrad. So not to make light of a bad situation, but it is a personal situation. Acrylic markers have kind of allowed me to play around with that medium without all of those negative connotations. So there is printing on this, but it is very, very faint. It's hard to read the printing, pink on pink, and it's very sparkly. We're going to move to the desktop in a little bit, but I don't know that you guys will be able to see it any better. I mean, it is really hard to read. Shake well before use, remove the cover of top valve, press the valve 4 to 5 times, start using, recap lightly after use. Notice, to prevent ink splatters, ensure the cap is on while shaking. 2, only press the valve if the tip seems dry during use. And these are also distributed by Kova Associates and C&E Connection. These were designed by Shenzhen Arrtx Co. Limited in Shenzhen, which is in Guangdong, China. So this has a elastic strip to hold it closed. It is might be plastic and cardboard case. It is very cute, very pastel. And then these are the markers inside. And we're gonna move to the desktop to take a better look at this, but they are Brushtip acrylic markers and they seem to have a fiber tip. They did not come with any kind of brochure. They did not come with any further instructions. They did not come with a swatch sheet. They did not come with much. So maybe you were here because you bought these or received these as a gift and you're curious about how to use them. Hopefully I can help you out with that today. And then for this sketchbook, I'm hoping this is a mixed media sketchbook because I plan on trying these Simptap markers in this. This is a 60-page sketchbook and it is 180 GM, which if I remember correctly, that's about cover stock weight. And it also has a very sparkly color and it's actually in one of my favorite shades of green, this kind of yellow green or green gold or olive green. It's the color of the swamps in spring and it's one of my favorite colors if you cannot tell. I didn't do this on purpose. I did not realize they were I knew they were sending me the markers. They'd actually contacted me about a few different markers, so I wasn't sure which ones they were sending. That's one of the reasons I wanted to wait and see before I said anything. But I didn't know what color sketchbook. I didn't even know they were sending me a sketchbook. So it's kind of kismet that it matches. And it's a very sparkly cover. And let's see. Inside is instructions. The exposed binder is a special design for easy flat lay. So it sits flat like this. Let's see if we open it to the middle, if it'll sit flat, nice. And there is a pocket on the inside. Let's see if there's a pocket on the other inside. No, there is not. And when you reach the last page, it does not lie so flat. So I wonder, yeah, as you use the sketchbook, it will kind of shift to accommodate that since this part of the binding has not been glued to the cover. It is a hardcover sketchbook and I do appreciate them sending it. It's a very nice sketchbook. But I'm gonna let you guys, and it is about cover stock weight paper with a slight texture. I can see it being really good for color pencils. I am gonna try the markers on it. I will be honest with you guys, I'll let you guys in on a little secret, not secret. I don't use nice sketchbooks. I use cheap spiral bound sketchbooks because like a lot of people, I get kind of blank page phobic and I'm afraid of ruining like a pretty hole like this. So with those cheap spiral bounds, if I don't like it, I can rip it out and not worry too much about it. But I do appreciate it. It is very pretty and I am definitely going to try their acrylic markers in this. It did mostly say for pencils and it didn't say mixed media. But you know, they came together, I might as well try them together. And these are waterproof acrylic markers. So let's head on over to the desktop and take a closer look at these. told you guys I would give you guys a better view. So this is the marker box. I don't think my camera's gonna pick up the subtle sparkle effect that they've got going on the box. Mine is a little bit beaten up, but you know, not too bad. And you guys can see how it's held shut with an elastic band. This is their saturated color set, although there does look to be at least one skin tone in it. I am definitely going to rearrange the color order of this because it is not in chromatic order, and that's going to bug me. This is what one marker looks like. So it has a 1 to 8 millimeter brush tip. The brush probably could post, but this is how we prime it. You don't prime the brush, you prime this back here. Kind of similar to how Posca's brush markers were. So you can't really post the marker. We don't have a color name, we just have a color number. We have a view window that shows how much is in here. For some reason there is like a sticky something along the collar. Not sure what that is. It's kind of gross. I just have sensory issues, so it could be anything. Strong covering force, sunproof and waterproof, it says. It has instructions, so we're going to go over the instructions one more time because I know Arrtx likes when I go over the instructions. Shake well before use. Press top of marker body. Start using. Recap tightly after use. And that's basically it for the marker. And when it shuts, it snaps back on. Is there? No, there is no honeycomb to hold these markers in place. Unlike the other box, that was something I liked about that box. And there's no easel to kind of prop it up. The sketchbook, I have one with a sort of olive green color. It has some of the same pretty sparkle effect that this has, but my camera is not really showing it up. And it is embossed with Arrtx Sketchbook with what looks like a puppy and a bunny. Again, there is a pocket in the front. And then, to demonstrate this better, it is lay flat bound. So voila. So I think what we ought to do next is start priming these so we can swatch them. So after dumping out the markers, I found an instruction sheet and it says tips. For second time use, after shaking the pen well, basically press it once, then good to go. No need to press it frequently. Please don't open the cap too hard to avoid ink spilling out. Observe whether the nib is still wet or not when using it. If wet, test the colors before use. If not wet, open the cap and press the valve once to let the ink flow out. So don't pump these while the cap is on, it sounds like. Yeah. Wait. One. Yeah, remove the top and press the valve. Okay. The real valve does not have a rebound design, which is designed to prevent ink leakage due to collision during daily storage. So it requires a certain force to press to get the ink out. So it is actually, like, you can see I'm putting a little bit of pressure on it. It's not going anywhere. And then the instructions in Chinese. I also received a thank you card. They would love it if I would use their hashtag Arrtx. If I have any questions, I can contact them. And then they have their socials down here. So one thing I don't love is I do wish that this box had that awesome honeycomb grid thing they had going on, because it really made sorting my markers and keeping them in place easier. And If you know, you know. So I'm trying to figure out how I want to have these so I can keep the order at least in a Okay, I know I'm gonna have to switch out some of these colors. I'm assuming that some of these colors, the caps don't match the color inside. That's pretty normal. So I may have to switch some colors around, but this isn't gonna hold anything in place. I'm gonna have to figure out a better containment unit for this, but I do want to start swatching them with you guys. So since these don't have a holder, I just used one that I already had. It works pretty well. One thing you want to keep in mind is there's actually a protective cap on this so that it doesn't get deployed, you know, by accident. So any holder you choose needs to have holes big enough that it's not going to catch on them. Before I dip into time lapse for swatching, we're going to open their sketchbook. I'm also going to swatch this in a Canson XL, but I did want to try it in their sketchbook. And I'm already noticing that this does not want to stay down, so we'll try that instead. I'm going to pick a darker color marker, so I'm gonna bother myself by not going in chromatic order, but that's okay. And we're going to, you know, do the operation of getting these things started together. So it says shake well before use. And my experience with the Arrtx markers is they do tend to separate quickly, so you do need to shake them quite a bit. And they also seem to contain a lot of, in order to be as opaque as they are, they contain a lot of PW6. So they're going to be more pastel than if you're used to like Liquitex or Molotow, then you might see with them. So then it is press top of marker. So I'm pressing this, but actually what it doesn't say is there's a little cap. So we're going to remove that little cap. And we're gonna, and I think they said pump 4 or 5 times, right? Ooh, that does take a good amount of force. 3. You can see it like really pumping it. See how? Yeah. So, gonna try to get some shots where you guys can really see how these markers, and also look. So this is the color of the marker. This is the color of the cap. Very different colors, much, much lighter. So this is definitely going to be a magic of time lapse sort of thing. I thought I set it to focus. Sorry, y'all. And then normally what I'll do to encourage the ink flow is just have it down. But I'm like, oops, and see if you pump too much, it will drip. You could blot that off with a paper towel, but you know, in the end that does become wasteful. So that's just something you should probably be aware of. We've got 48 of these to get through, and I'm very curious to see how these are going to differ from some of the other acrylic markers that we've talked about here on the channel. So I'm trying to shake them up a whole lot, and the clear view window is helpful to make sure you're mixing your paint enough. The prime pump on the back has a cute little cap to protect it so you don't accidentally prime it in transit, but it's really stiff and hard to prime. You need a good amount of hand strength, and people with hand arthritis or grip issues may find these challenging to get started. I know I'm struggling. My thumbs are going to be wrecked after 48 of these. It also helps to let gravity help pull the ink through the nib rather than trying to pump the whole time. The brush is surprisingly soft and squishy without being too floppy. I think it's fiber, but there might be a chance that it's not. It might be a type of foam. The caps, particularly with the skin tones, don't really match the skin tones, so swatching and having a swatch map is important. That said, there's a good amount of skin tones. This might be the set that anime artists are using to get those basic skin tones in acrylic marker. And keep in mind that these acrylics do dry darker than they go down. It's the opposite of watercolors. The plungers are so stiff. They are really hard on my hands. My hands really hurt after I primed all 48 of these. I felt like it took forever. It took about 2 hours to prep and prime all these markers. It's slow work, so if you can rope somebody in on this, that would be helpful. The brushes feel kind of like a stiff foam that might go mushy if pushed too far. And shaking isn't just about mixing the paint, it helps prime the markers, so make sure you shake a lot. These are surprisingly hard to prime. I have spent 2 hours to swatch 48 colors. I found some things that work. Shake them a lot, like a lot more than you're used to with acrylic markers, because shaking actually helps prime them. I think what it does is it actually builds air into the barrel. And shake with the cap on, by the way. Cap on and this little plastic cap off. Shake like this and it will help build air up, and that's going to pressurize this and make it easier to prime the back, and it's going to push more ink out the front. But it's still exhausting. It's still hard on the hands. So if you have repetitive strain issues, if you have arthritis, you have weak hands, whatever, you may, and you want these, you may need to get somebody else to prime them for you. That said, I was impressed. I was impressed with the skin tone selection. I'm going to have to reorganize these a little bit. In fact, there's a lot of skin tones, not so much other colors, but a lot of skin tones. Now, that's not a problem for me because I have Arrtx's other set of acrylic markers, so I can kind of use them together. And that set doesn't have as many skin tones, so it kind of bulks out what I have. But if you're not interested in drawing people, if you're not interested in this kind of color palette, it might be less useful for you. Something else that I noticed is that some of the color, the caps are irrelevant. The cap color is irrelevant. It doesn't really, these are all much more pastel-y or muted than what the caps show. I thought there were going to be some neons or some fluorescence like I saw in the Ohuhu set. Not with these. That's not how these are formulated. Even if the cap looks fluorescent, it's not fluorescent. Now, I don't really like neons, and I'm not, well, I do, but not for this. And I'm not like into metallics. I do, but again, not for this. So for me, this is a good thing. This was actually an area of frustration with the Ohuhu markers, is those have a lot more fluorescence and neons. Fluorescence and metallics, and I found that it didn't have as many base colors and no skin tone colors. This set kind of goes the other way. Also, having a brush tip, at least so far, is a refreshing change of pace, because, oh, look at the color. Look. You get like this color, and then on the other side, that color. Let's see what we get out of it. Oh, yeah. This is why we shake this. Look at that. Yeah. You are definitely going to want to have some scratch paper on hand with these two, because it does seem like they separate kind of quick. Now, it seems like Arrtx is well aware that there's going to be dripping, there's going to be color separation issues. They advise that you don't shake these without the cap on because of splatter effects, and that you're careful when you're capping and uncapping for the same reason. So it seems like they're aware of that. This is always kind of a problem with brush tip acrylic markers, is the pressurization issue and making sure there is enough pressure in the barrel that you have good ink flow. So this isn't really like a complaint. It's just me noticing these things and talking about them. I was interested in Posca's brush tip markers years ago, and those actually had individual bristles. I don't know if they still do, but at the time, which was 2012, they had individual bristles. I picked some up the first time I went to Japan, and the ink flow was rough. It was hard to get consistent ink flow with those. So it'll be interesting to see how these keep up. Now that I've got them primed, I've done all the hard work. I'm going to reorder some of these colors a little bit, and then I'm going to re-swatch over on my Canson XL watercolor paper. When swatching on the Canson XL, I noticed that you can see the colors already separating out in the skin tones. It happens that fast. I basically swatched in the sketchbook they sent and then swatched on the Canson. And this happened in the brush itself, which I found surprising. So it doesn't really matter how much you shake these. There is still going to be some separation that you have to work out of the brush. So I really recommend having a swatch sheet of paper or a scrap sheet of paper handy. The Simptap markers swatched on this paper pretty well. I could see these being good for covering large areas. However, with many of the skin tones, I'm already starting to see that color separation, particularly up here. I'll move you guys in close so you can see what I'm talking about. So you can see the separation up here. This was even with me shaking the marker, Part of the problem is the colors start to separate in the brush itself. Let me see if I can pull out one of the offending colors. So you can see we have our pink side, and then we have our more yellowy orange side. Gravity is probably why that's happening. The heavier pigments are probably falling in the brush. But you definitely want to have, and I know I have some spots here. That was just part of the priming process. It didn't uniformly soak through. It will over time. But that's one of the reasons you're going to want to have a scratch sheet of paper or something handy so that you can make sure that these colors, you can see that really well here, yellow, and then more pinky. And to be fair, most skin tones do have some yellow in them, so I understand them including yellow in the mix. It's just having trouble staying in solution and it starts to fall out. And it's really mostly just a problem with the lighter skin tones. The greens, the purples, the blues, these are all fine. I don't see any separation there really that a little bit of shaking wouldn't bring up. But if you're someone who wants to draw people with these, then it's going to start to be a problem, and it's something you should be aware of. So one of the big issues I had with Arrtx's bullet nib markers was drawing and my inability to kind of get in there. Everything I did with them was kind of blobby. So I wanted to try drawing a bright yellow and pink hibiscus in this Canson watercolor sketchbook, just to kind of give me an idea of how these are going to handle. I want to try painting and drawing with these in this sketchbook. I'm going to tape off a square using washi tape. I don't know. I just wanted to see how well these would work for a clean edge sort of tape thing that I see people doing. So we're going to try using masking tape to mask. And I'm sketching in a hibiscus using red lead. Have a scratch sheet of paper over to the side to mix the color on the brush, because color separation is kind of a big thing with these. It is very easy to fill a larger area with these markers, much easier than the bullet tip acrylic markers that I've talked about in the past. It was a little streaky on the first pass, but that's okay. I'm going to let that dry and go over it again. For best coverage, especially larger areas, shake often. Shaking the brush pins helps to ensure that paint reaches the brush. This will also help prevent the brush from fraying prematurely because it helps keep the ink flow up. It took me so little time to cover the background in blue, and I didn't really suffer any hand strain when filling the background. So if you have arthritis problems like I do and you want to try acrylic markers, these might be a better fit for you once you get them primed. The pinks I have won't really do what I need for the hibiscus, so I'm going with yellow and red instead. This yellow is not as opaque as I expected. You can still see my line art through it, which works for me, but it might not work if you're looking for a full coverage acrylic marker. The brushes on these really help prevent tearing up the paper. I did not have any paper pilling, tearing, or fraying with these. If you tend to work in a flow state, recapping and shaking these constantly might be kind of distracting for you. And these colors are not super opaque or covering, but that means they can be layered and built up, which for some artists is better, as you guys will see as I work on this hibiscus. Honestly, at this point, I felt like these were pretty cool. I can see them being great for sketchbook artists who are looking for mixed media or something more unusual. Just make sure you're using heavy-duty paper with these. And if you apply a single application too thickly, like the paint pools on the paper, it can start to crack as it dries. So just keep that in mind. I was working from photo reference while painting this hibiscus, and I had a lot of fun painting a hibiscus with these paint markers. They work really well in the Canson XL watercolor sketchbook. The paper is just heavy enough and it's designed to handle water, which works great for acrylics because acrylics have kind of a water solution until they evaporate out. So this is a paper that's decently well designed to take these kind of markers, and this would be my recommendation if you're looking for a sketchbook to use acrylic markers in, a heavier paper like this. I was able to do a lot of layering without any major problems, without the paper curling, without it warping, buckling, pilling, tearing, fraying, no problems like that. And you can also see how I was able to kind of layer some things, adjust the color, and just kind of build things up. These were a lot of fun in this sketchbook. I had so much fun painting the hibiscus that I wanted to keep doodling and sketching with these markers in this sketchbook. So I'm kind of messing around with some ideas for some Louisiana inspired Christmas ornaments, doing kind of a heavy border around the edges using the acrylic marker to just kind of block things off, and just kind of working with the colors that I have. So what I'm doing is I have these in like this big foam marker holder that won't fit on my desk. So I'm doing my best to select the colors that I think I will need for the objects that I'm painting, in this case, a Tabasco-esque bottle, or a Tabasco-inspired bottle, I guess, and swatching them over to the side using the swatch sheet, and then just kind of building things up as I go along. And these markers are so fun for this kind of like simpler, more graphic, more like a sketch type of acrylic. So if you're an acrylic painter and you're looking for something, these colors are not going to be an exact match, right? But something that might work in your sketchbook that is kind of similar to acrylics, if that makes sense. Like if you're finding that color pencils or watercolor or alcohol markers aren't cutting it for you for what you're looking to do, these could be a really good alternative. Now, I mentioned earlier that I have kind of a fraught history with paint style acrylics. And one of the big problems I had was that we weren't really taught paint management. We weren't really taught how to get the most out of a tube of paint. And we were painting these giant 4-foot canvases. And I constantly had problems with my paint drying out before I'd had a chance to use it, because we also weren't introduced to any additives. So something that I really like about these is I don't have to worry about the paint drying out. I can just kind of get into a flow state and work. And I've got this semi-opaque to opaque medium that has these really bright colors that don't necessarily require a lot of mixing. Now, I am going to talk about blending a little bit later on. I mostly avoided doing blending for this because I figured it might tear up the paper or it might ruin the nibs with cross-color contamination, and they didn't supply extra nibs, so I didn't want to risk ruining the nibs. But I did end up playing with blending a little bit later on, so we're going to talk about that a little bit further in, but that wasn't really my focus with these. My focus was just kind of like cell shaded, more graphic, kind of simple, kind of capturing the essence of things. And I found that these were great for that. So if you like more graphic art, these could also be a really good fit. the designs that I did in my watercolor sketchbook, I think this oyster is probably the most painterly of all of them. There was more back and forth. I wasn't just blocking things in. I was kind of letting the brushes do a lot of the lifting for me, and I found them to be pretty easy to use. This is also the one that leaned the most heavily on using neutrals and skin tones, and I definitely had a lot of problems with the colors separating out in the marker and on the brush tip itself, which I found kind of surprising. I thought the brush would kind of hold everything in solution, and it doesn't. So you really have to have that like scrap sheet of paper over to the side, and you're just gonna have to scrub that marker until the color kind of remixes itself. So that could cause a lot of waste, and some people might not like that. That said, if you were using paint acrylics, you would probably be doing a lot of color mixing anyway. So to me, this is kind of like a sacrifice you make for the sake of convenience. And while it might be a minor annoyance, it's really not that big a deal. But I do really want to impress upon you guys how quickly these separate out, how much you need to shake them, how much you need to swatch them, especially if you're planning on taking these with you as like a plein air tool or a vacation tool, something like that. You definitely need that space to have that scratch sheet of paper so that you can kind of work the colors a little bit more. I'm not really using that for color mixing, or I'm not at all using it for color mixing, just for kind of mixing the color in the marker itself to get the color that is supposed to be the color of the marker, if that makes sense. After I did a few Louisiana staples, I decided to do some more florals, including some Louisiana staples like a magnolia, a Louisiana iris, and a water lily. And I found that these were really fun. Okay, look, I'm not able to get the kind of color nuance that some artists might be looking for in general, right? Like, my brain doesn't necessarily work that way when it comes to acrylic. It tends to go more graphic, more cell shading, a little bit more simple. So I was really happy with these. I was really happy with kind of what they did for me and what they allowed me to, like, I didn't spend a lot of time being stuck in one headspace. It kind of simplified things for me, and I like that. But these are not capable of 1,000 tricks, right? This is not the art supply that is the most versatile art supply in terms of color mixing, in terms of blending color. It's really versatile in terms of what it can write on and how you can use it. But for me, while the brush is such an improvement over the bullet nibs, I like the brushes so much better, and I really like these, and I'm gonna really enjoy playing around with these even more. It's not the same as doing an acrylic painting. You're not going to get the same kind of soft feathered blending that's possible. You're not going to be able to get some of the soft ombre transitions. Just some of the nuance is going to be lost. And I like that. I find, like, if I wanted that, I would turn to acrylics or I would turn to watercolor. I like that in these markers because they kind of simplify things and they make it more graphic, and that's just kind of fun and appealing to me. You definitely could use these with alcohol markers, in that you could do your alcohol marker first and then do your acrylic on top of it, because alcohol is a solvent to acrylics. It will melt the acrylics and you'll end up ruining your alcohol markers. But I do think you can kind of use them together for a mixed media approach. This video, if you guys have not noticed, has already gone on long enough, so I'm not going to do it in this video. But if you guys are interested in seeing how you can use acrylic markers with alcohol markers for a mixed media thing, let me know down in the comments. I would love to do that. I just need to know that you guys are interested in seeing me do it. So I'm able to get much more nuanced brush strokes, as you guys can see here with this Louisiana iris, than what I was able to get with the Arrtx bullet tip markers. In fact, I did a Louisiana iris with that as well, but I liked the color selection in the other Arrtx set, the bullet tip 48 set, a little bit better than I like the color selection in this set. This set has a lot of skin tones, but it is really hard to keep the skin tones in solution. So it made me really hesitant to try doing any figure, like drawing faces or anything like that. But again, if you guys are interested in seeing me do like an alcohol marker and acrylic marker mixed media tutorial, I actually have a design in mind that I think would work really well for that. So let me know and I'll bite the bullet and see how it handles. But I just found that I didn't
have the color selection. So usually I'm looking for a light, a medium, and a dark for any color, pink, purple, whatever. And in general, yeah, we did have that, but I felt like I still struggled to kind of get that balance. As you can see with the Louisiana Iris, there wasn't a light enough light tone with that purple that really worked with it. And with this Water Lily, I'm having trouble getting a dark enough color for the shadow that reads correctly. So the way they achieve opacity with these markers is they add a white additive. I think that's my best guess, maybe PW6, as I've mentioned earlier. And it basically increases the mass tone. So all the colors look brighter, they pop more, and they have more coverage. They're not as translucent, but that kind of makes them all more pastel, and you don't really get that color depth that you would get if they hadn't added the PW6. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more a little bit later on in the video, but I do want to bring it up now because I think for some people, some artists, that might be like a concern. I would bet, I haven't tried these with like Liquitex acrylic markers yet, but I would bet you could use them together. So you probably can start out with a set like this, and then as you need those darker colors, you can buy Molotov or you can buy Liquitex, and you can kind of add that in. You can also paint on top of these with regular acrylics, or you can add these on top of regular acrylics. That said, if you're using a professional grade like Liquitex or Golden, and then you're adding these on top of it, I can't vouch for what that's going to do to the longevity of those paints or those colors. I would probably use these more for sketchbook projects, craft projects, painting on tote bags, that kind of thing, rather than necessarily on a canvas for something that you want to sell, or on a canvas for something that you want to keep for a really long time. I don't really know the lifespan of these markers, and I would be really hesitant to pitch them as that kind of a solution, right? I would definitely put these in like hobby and student grade. They're a lot of fun. They definitely inspire the imagination, which I think a good student grade art supply should do. But I don't know that they're going to last like 150 years the way some modern professional grade acrylics are supposed to last. And to be fair, with their marketing, it's not really aimed towards that. It's like painting on tote bags and painting on rocks and painting on plastic and painting on ceramic. And I'm not actually sure how well these would handle on ceramic. I would think these might chip off because they are acrylic and they're not bonding to the ceramic the same way those Sharpie oil markers will bond to molecularly to the ceramic. So I don't know. I think you can mark on ceramic. I just don't think it would be like dishwasher safe or like permanent. You know what I mean? But I think you can do it. If you've tried these on ceramic and you've dishwashered them, washed them in a dishwasher, come on, Becca, and you were satisfied and they held up, let me know down in the comments, because I'm just kind of going by my familiarity with acrylics, my familiarity with acrylic markers, and what they are and are not capable of doing. But I love that these have a brush option. I think that makes these much more usable for somebody like me. It is much easier to fill large areas like you're seeing here. It makes it very quick to do art. Like these dry fairly quickly, which is another reason it can be challenging to blend colors with these or to get that more nuanced effect, is that on paper they soak in and they dry almost immediately, which is part of the reason why we're not tearing up the paper when we're doing layer after layer after layer, is they've already kind of sealed the paper in their prior layers and they're not staying wet. But it does affect how well they blend. And I do think that on an unprimed canvas, you would run these things dry very quickly. But I am kind of interested in trying these out on like a mini primed canvas or a canvas board just to see how I like them, because I did play around with the Arrtx bullet tips on like a mini canvas board, and that was kind of fun, but I felt like those took forever to dry. I had to basically work one pansy at a time, and I'm wondering if these would dry faster or if these would dry slower. So that's definitely something to think about and maybe revisit and let you guys know if, you know, how they compare. I have been thinking about doing a comparison video where I compare the acrylic markers that I have against each other and talk about them with you guys. Let me know if that's something that you guys would be interested in me doing as well. this is supposed to be a Louisiana blue crab, and I was really kind of hoping I could do some color layering. So I did like a brown base, hoping that I could like adjust the colors and just kind of use that as a jumping off point. But unfortunately, these colors are a little more opaque than that, but they're not as opaque as you would like. I would call them like 2-layer acrylics. So that brown didn't shine through the blue green as much as I'd kind of hoped that it would. So it took more like going back and forth and kind of finessing it and adjusting the color to kind of get it to be what I was hoping for it to be. And for all of these, I was working some of them loosely, some of them tightly from photo reference, just, you know, so that I'm not like, I don't know, trying to hold that space in my head while also trying to learn how to use a material. I just had the reference up on the screen and I was letting that inspire me and help me kind of choose what colors would be the best fit and what would kind of work with what. Another point is that these, once they're dry, another layer on top isn't going to reactivate them. So you're not necessarily going to get like, you can do a yellow outline on a blue crab like we're doing here, and you're not ruining your yellow because it's not going to reactivate that blue and basically turn it to green. General, I found that the colors that are not skin tones, the blues, the reds, that sort of thing, the non-neutrals, those didn't separate as much in general. Those held up the best in general. Those didn't require as much shaking and as much swatching and as much scrubbing out on the paper in general. With the skin tones, if they are not properly mixed, you can get some pretty significant yellowing, some pretty significant changes in opacity. You can get some pretty significant changes in how the color itself actually appears. And that's going to be fairly noticeable on this page of just mushrooms because I'm using these kind of lighter neutrals for the base. And you know, I just didn't shake that second color as much as I should have, and it was way more yellow, and I had to kind of work it back and forth. And that's not, I mean, it's in a sketchbook. It's not really that big a deal to me, but I am pointing it out in case you are like, let's say you're a convention commission artist, right? And you are trying to work quickly because you have a backlog. The whole way you make money is by doing a bunch of simplified commissions very quickly. I know that life. I've lived that life. So color accuracy and being able to grab the color and it be the right color and you don't have to fuss around with it a whole lot is really important to artists in that position. That's where my ginormous convenience color watercolor palette came from, right? Is that life. So for that, these might not be the best fit, or you may just have to accept your fate and shake those skin tones and shake those neutrals a whole lot to be able to get those consistent skin tones that honestly, if you're doing anime con commissions, you're gonna need those. Also, while the darker skin tone, while there are theoretically darker skin tones, they don't read as skin tones as much. They're a little less saturated. They're a little more gray. They feel a little bit like putty or like zombie skin. So I would be a little bit hesitant to use some of those colors for darker skin tone people, unless I did like a lot of color adjusting either in how I handled it or, you know, in Photoshop. So that's just another consideration to keep in mind, is that some of the darker neutrals in this set are not as strong as some of the darker neutrals in the other Arrtx set. And Arrtx makes a lot. They sell a lot of acrylic markers. They've got other brush tip markers that have like a different way of getting the ink to the tip of the brush, and I'd love to take a look at those as well because those are really neat. And they've got way more colors available, and they've got different sets. Like, this isn't their only brush tip acrylic marker. This isn't their only brush tip acrylic marker color set. This is not your only option. So You know, I haven't tried all of their acrylic markers, so I'm not going to be like, they just flat out do not have good darker skin tones. Because I think they've got a wider range than this. I think they very well might have better darker skin tones. I'm just saying that in this particular set, some of the darker neutrals don't read dark enough, don't read saturated enough for me to want to use them for darker skin tones. And I felt like that kind of showed through while doing these mushrooms. So I have this tumbler that I picked up at Dollar Tree, and I wanted to try doing some Echinacea on the tumbler. So I'm swatching out some of the colors that I think might work well for Echinacea's cone flower. So for the cone, that center cone, and then for the petals as well. And I figured this would be a really good opportunity, even though I don't intend to do a lot of blending with these markers. I felt like this was going to be a good opportunity to kind of demonstrate some blending, and we could kind of see how well these blend together. And I am sorry that my camera is like freaking out. I don't know why. I'd set it to focus. There might have been some dust on the lens or something like that. To start with an orange to brown color blend. I'm starting with my lighter color. I'm kind of feathering it out, and I am so sorry for that. Hopefully it will resolve itself. I go in with the darker color, kind of feathering it out, and then I go back in with the lighter color on top of that darker color to kind of blend them. And then to extend it, I'm going to take some more of that second darker color, feather it out, zoom in so you guys can see what I'm doing, and then kind of feather it in with the red, and do the same thing for the red to the brown. And you guys will be able to see that better here with this pink example. Okay, so you see how I'm kind of feathering the two colors into each other. It's not a clean blend, but then I'm using the lighter color to kind of mix them together while they're still wet. This would probably work better on a coated surface or a slick plastic. On paper that's going to absorb the water, it doesn't stay wet long enough to get a good blend. I'm going to go in with the purple and then use the middle color and kind of blend that into the purple while the purple's still wet and try to blend it back. Part of the problem with this though is you do pick up a lot of that color, so cleaning the brush takes time, and you really got to do this while these are still wet. So I would say that while blending is possible, it is kind of a challenge, and time is not necessarily on your side for this. Maybe if you're a really fast artist, you could do it. I'm not a fast artist, so I'm kind of struggling with it. And part of what would help is more paint on the brush. So over pumping and there being a lot of paint on the brush so that can stay wet instead of working with a drier brush would probably help with blending. But I also feel like some of these colors are not close enough to one another to do clean blends anyway. As you guys can kind of see above with the pink to the purple, it's hard to get a clean blend because there's just not enough of every type of color in this set for those kind of clean blends. Now, before I start painting on the tumbler, I kind of want to figure out how I'm going to handle Echinacea, and I'm trying to figure out whether or not I want to sketch it like with pencil first, the way I did with the Louisiana irises on the metal tumbler in the other Arrtx video, or if I want to kind of freehand it, because this is a flower that I draw a lot, and it's not a super complicated flower. It's basically like a rounded cone and then some long rectangles or some long ovals. And I decided I'm going to do just a couple of Echinacea studies, trying a couple of different techniques just to kind of figure out a workflow before I commit myself to doing this on the tumbler. Now, you guys are going to see the tumbler in a minute, but I picked it up at Dollar Tree and I'd hand washed it with dish soap first and let it dry, but a few weeks had passed, so I wanted to clean it again. And I thought, oh, a spritz of rubbing alcohol will take off any like finger grease, surface grease from it just sitting around. What I did not expect, and you guys will see it in a minute, was that the rubbing alcohol actually dissolved. So, like, if I had wiped it down with rubbing alcohol, I could have removed the whole orange to purple ombre that was going on it. I guess they'd used alcohol-based inks to apply that color to it. I've never seen anything like that in something you're meant to eat or drink from, but I guess that's Dollar Tree for you. And since I don't know whether or not these markers are food safe, I wasn't planning on eating or drinking from that tumbler anyway. But I decided to kind of salvage it by doing like a spritz effect to kind of make it, like, give it a dapple thing. You'll see what I'm talking about when I show you the tumbler. But I just kind of wanted to explain that and preface that before we get to it, while I'm kind of demonstrating a few different ways of thinking about how I want to draw the Echinacea. And I'm liking this much simpler, cuter, more rounded version down at the bottom. So that's what I'm going to go with when I'm drawing on the tumbler itself. The tumbler, and that kind of like misty thing you see going on, that's what I was talking about with the rubbing alcohol. So I decided to just draw straight up on it. I started with the brown cones first, kind of placing them around the perimeter of the tumbler, and then I went in with our very lightest yellow green and drew in stems, and now I'm drawing in the leaves, and I'm just kind of trying to fill everything fairly uniformly. Once that dried, I'm just going in and doing like really rounded, kind of cute petal forms. Now, this is a fairly straightforward project, but dang, it was hard on my hand to hold that tumbler still while the paints dried so that they wouldn't drip, because there was a chance of a little bit of dripping with this one. I did over prime the markers so that we'd have good ink flow, and it was just really hard on my hand. So if you're doing something like this at home, one, you might want to find a way to seal it onto your tumbler if you plan on eating or drinking from it. And two, you may want to find something to kind of hold it steady. I also found that even though these are supposed to be, you know, good coverage and very opaque, I did need to go over it with a second layer of the same color on the petals to make sure that it was saturated enough. And you guys will see me probably filling in the leaves as well. I don't think that's the end of the world. I don't think 2 layers is really that much to expect, but you know, they do advertise as being very opaque and good coverage. So I did want to point that out just so that you're aware of it. It wouldn't be a deal breaker for me, but it is something that I would want to know about a marker before I bought them and before I started planning projects around them. of the reasons that I go to like Five Below and Dollar Tree to find these kind of objects to draw on is because I'm not really sure how food safe these are. So I'm not sure how much practical use I'm going to be able to get out of them. So they're probably just going to be display items. And I don't want to spend a lot of money on something that I'm going to customize and just use a display item rather than as a functional item. So these are probably going to hold, I do the Lego botanical sets. These are probably going to hold at least one Lego botanical bouquet. Because why not? So here is a tote bag I ordered off of Amazon. I am putting in some cardboard and I'm going to clip it down. This is basically to keep it stretched and to give it some support. I have a vague idea for some cute mushrooms that I want to do, and I sketched them in using pink lead. I am blocking in all the basic colors just to make it easier for me to see and for you to see, because I am well aware that pink lead is really hard to see. I did not apply gesso or any kind of primer to this, and I probably should have, even just Mod Podge. I just went straight into it with the acrylic markers. In this instance, for the initial marking in, it might be easier to block things in with bullet tips rather than the brush tips. This fabric, which is kind of like a canvas duck, is really tearing up these brush tips. It's making them really mushy and it's really absorbative, so it's draining these markers. It is challenging to keep paint flow up to cover without dripping all over the place, and you guys will see some drips later on, and then you'll see me doing some on-purpose drips to cover up the not on-purpose drips and to make it look more intentional. I thought that once the base level was there, it would be much easier to paint as it won't soak in. That is somewhat true. So again, if you have some way to kind of prime this or gesso it, that might be smart. Keep in mind, we can't really wash this, and I wouldn't recommend doing this on a stretchy fabric. Fabric paints have plasticizers in them to help them stretch and move, whereas this may crack with use and with washing. And you could maybe do this on stiffer stuff, like a stiffer fabric. You're going to want to have to shake these markers constantly to keep up the ink flow and to keep up the pressure, because this is really thirsty fabric. The brush tips are starting to go mushy working on this ribbed canvas, but to be honest, I expected these brush tips to go mushy like way before now. So I'm impressed at how well they held up. This was also an evening project, like 5 or 6 hours worth of painting. I really didn't have to sit and wait around a whole lot for paint to dry. I did eat dinner in between doing like the very base filling in and then adding in all the details, so that kind of gave it a chance to dry. I was also watching The Good Wife while working on this, so I wasn't like super paying attention to how long it was taking me. I was just kind of enjoying myself and vibing. I think I also watched an episode of Dan to Dan. I am all caught up on the manga and I really enjoy it, but it's a tricky one to recommend to people because there's some stuff that happens early in that you're kind of like, ooh, I don't know about that. Anyway, I had a lot of fun painting on this tote bag with these markers. I was pretty happy with the end result. I did go with a subject matter that, you guys remember me painting a bunch of mushrooms. I did go with a subject matter that I was fairly confident in, that it's kind of like my comfort thing. If I don't know what to draw, it's going to be mushrooms. And I really did want to kind of capture like the gills underneath that fly agaric. So what I ended up doing was I found that the second color I chose was too dark. So I did a layer of white on top of it just to kind of mitigate it. With some colors, you can do this kind of layering to achieve the colors that you want. With some of these colors, they are so opaque you can't do it. And there's not really a rhyme or reason that I could figure out about which ones are going to allow that and which ones aren't. So it's just kind of a trial and error sort of thing, just becoming familiar with the materials. I wrecked that light green and the white marker on this. That light green is gone. And I don't think you can buy individual open stock refills for this. I'm going to double check myself on that. You might be able to contact Arrtx though and buy like a smaller like basic color set to kind of fill that in. And there is the tote bag. I am definitely not planning on offering custom painted tote bags because even though I was trying to be speedy and make it a one-night project and I succeeded, it was still time consuming. It took forever and it was very labor consuming as well. And time and labor consuming commissions are very expensive. I do, however, have super cute tote bags in the shop with different designs if you'd like a cute mushy tote. I did find that stretching or supporting the bag with clips and cardboard helps a lot. If you don't support your canvas, it's going to wiggle all over the place. I can't really see how painting on a tote bag is all that different from painting on a canvas, or the precaution or preparations that you would take if you wanted to paint with a canvas. So basically I'm saying treat your tote bags like you would a canvas.
Now it's time to talk about the pros and cons of the Arrtx Simptap acrylic markers. These were sent to me care of thanks to Arrtx. Thank you so much, Arrtx, for sending me these and giving me a chance to give them a look and share them with you guys. So for the pros, I like these a lot better than the bullet tip or plastic nib acrylic markers. It's easier to cover large areas. They have a more painterly effect. They are super easy to use in a sketchbook. They're unlikely to tear up heavier paper, and it's fairly easy to do small, fine areas as well, which is something I really struggled with the bullet tip markers. The cons are that the fiber tips do eventually break down, and there are no replacements. Because these are opaque, they've added optical brighteners to kind of bulk up smaller pigments and make them more opaque. So it's harder to get those dark darks or strong contrasts with these, as you can see on the moss down here. Because of the above, it's also harder to do glazes or color adjusting techniques. You can, it's not impossible, but it's way more challenging and not all of the colors will do it. These also need to be shaken and pumped constantly, particularly on unprimed fabrics like tote bags. Now, for comparison, here is one of the Arrtx acrylic markers. This is the kind with the bullet nib. You prime it by pushing in the bullet nib. The bullet nib does pull out. You can replace it. It does come with replacements. You can see the amount of ink you have as well as the separation through this clear insert, this clear window. And it also has gradations to kind of give you an idea of how much paint you have in them. With the Simptap, we have our pump action on the back, this button here. It's protected by this little cap. That can get a little bit annoying because you have to stop what you're doing and pull off the cap and pump it. The pump here pumps on the back and it puts it all the way through and it comes out through the brush, and you have to actually shake as part of the pump action. So with this, you shake to mix the paint, but with this, you shake it to pressurize the body. I want to also say bottle because it's holding the paint. You are pressurizing the body. So if you don't shake it, you're not going to get consistent ink flow, and it's very easy to kind of over prime it and get too much ink. So ink flow control is kind of challenging with this. So you're going to want a scratch sheet of paper to kind of work it out on. You can see there is a window, but it's not as good of a window, right? It's more stylized, so it's actually harder to get a really good idea of what the paint mixture looks like or how much paint you have. And it doesn't have the gradations. On both markers, though, you do have instructions. So this one is actually a 4-step rather than a 3-step. This is shake, press the tip, and then start using it. This is shake well, press the top of the marker body, start using, recap tightly after use. So one of the things it shows but doesn't mention is the cap really does need to be on while you're shaking it because it's very prone to dripping. And it also doesn't tell you to remove this little plastic cap. So for a while, I didn't know this was a cap. I thought this was part of the marker. I kept trying to push back on this to get it to prime, and I wasn't having any luck with it. I prefer the brush tips over the bullet nibs, but if you do a lot of acrylic marker art, I can actually see you having both. Both do kind of serve a purpose, and it kind of depends on what you're looking for. These are a little bit easier for covering large areas than these, but these are a little bit easier to control the ink flow and might be better on rougher surfaces, like if you were to draw a mural, to kind of sketch it in with these, because you can replace the tips and you can't replace the tips on these. You can't really see how the tip has gone mushy. I'm going to try to find one that I know. This one, I have basically used it up. There's not much left in it, although the window would not indicate that. And I'm trying not to get to a splatter, but I have basically, you can't really see, but unless I was using it. I've beaten up the tip so much that it's very mushy and it's very splayed out. But I have used these a lot and I've tested these on a lot of different surfaces. So I'm honestly not disappointed by how well they held up. Kind of the final straw for them was using it on this unprimed canvas tote bag. So what's my verdict? I really wanted to try brush acrylic markers. I wanted to see how the pump action worked. I wanted to see how they held up. I wanted to see how they handled. I'm really grateful Arrtx reached out to me and asked me to take a look at their Simptap acrylic markers. And I have to admit, these are a lot of fun for me. I ended up spending a lot more time than I'd planned just noodling around with them in my sketchbook. I would say if you want to use an acrylic marker as a planning tool, like alcohol markers were originally intended as a design and mock-up tool, or to noodle around on paper, or as an easy mixed media supply, these are great. That said, these aren't perfect. I wouldn't say they're a replacement for traditional tube acrylics or even acrylic brands like Liquitex that offer acrylic markers. They're not refillable, they don't have replaceable nibs, they require a lot of shaking and pumping to keep the ink flow up. They're kind of drippy, but they are fun. A lot of fun playing with the Arrtx Simptap acrylic markers. I want to thank them again for sending them my way to try out and share with you guys. I ended up spending a lot of time playing around with them in my watercolor sketchbooks. I found that the brush tip works really well on a heavier paper like this. You don't get any shredding. The mushing is kind of to a minimum, but you can do some really fun painterly things fairly quickly. I think these acrylic markers could be great for ideation the same way alcohol markers were originally intended. That doesn't mean you can't do more with them, but I can definitely see them being a great fit for sketchbook artists who are looking for something a little bit different, and maybe they want a faster dry time than watercolor, or they want more opacity than watercolor, or they just want more color punch than watercolor has to offer, or just honestly just a different medium. Do these replace traditional acrylic? No. Do I think they can be used in conjunction with traditional acrylic? It kind of depends on what you're going for and what your end goal is. I wouldn't necessarily use this for fine art or for commissions without first disclosing to my buyer that these are not exactly touted as professional grade. I would put these in line, and I say this with love, no slam, to the kind of acrylic paints that you can get, like Apple Barrel or Plaid acrylic paints, the kind of acrylic paints you get at hobby stores and at Walmart. And I think they are excellent for those kind of uses. Whether you want to try painting on a tote bag, or you want to try decorating a tumbler, or you want to noodle around with them in a sketchbook, that's kind of where they are in my mind. Liquitex does make acrylic markers. I don't believe they offer a brush tip acrylic marker. Those have been light fast tested. Those have the properties more akin to traditional acrylics. Like if you're used to acrylics for more fine art and you're used to there being some translucency with some colors and some transparency with some colors and some opacity with some colors, like different pigments having different properties, these are all basically the same. They've added something, I would think maybe a PW6 or something similar to that, to give all of them the same about level of opacity, which means some of the darker colors are a little bit lighter and grayer and more pastel than you might expect. That's kind of another reason why I would really hesitate to put them in with traditional acrylics and the expectations that we have for traditional acrylics. That said, they are a lot of fun. They are fairly affordable. I'll bring up a scroll of the price here over on Amazon. They are fairly accessible, and honestly, they are relatively mess-free. They are a little bit drippy, but compared to traditional acrylics or even the Apple Barrel acrylics that we were just talking about, these are far less messy, far more contained. And if you're a parent who has a kid who wants to do art with you, and you know, they're not gonna like draw on the walls or draw all over their hands, or you know, I teach teenagers, and every now and then you tell them that, and you get one of them who decides they are gonna color their hands an entire color using alcohol markers. So I have to disclaim that regardless, because impulsivity is impulsivity. But if you are a parent or a guardian or a teacher who has kids who are interested in using acrylics and you don't necessarily have the room or the time for all the mess that acrylic can have, these could be a great alternative. I had a lot of fun painting on this tote bag. The only caveat I would have is I would recommend finding some way to prime the surface first so it doesn't absorb all of that paint, because I ended up draining several brushes on this tote. But to be fair, this tote was the last thing I did after I filled several sketchbook pages with acrylic art, and I did a Tumbler, and I swatched a whole bunch. So, you know, maybe if we had started out with the tote, they wouldn't have died so fast, but I would still, if I have another tote, I may do something on that other tote, time permitting. Not for this, but you know, just for funsies. I'll probably find a way like Mod Podge or something like that, or fabric paint, maybe a clear fabric paint, just to seal the surface so that I have a more receptive surface for these paints. So that would be kind of my caveat. If you're going to use these kind of acrylic marker brush pins on a surface, but either do a base coat using like a liquid acrylic first, or find a way to Mod Podge it or gesso it or just seal it so it doesn't absorb as much. So the same would go for rocks, for terracotta pots, anything like that that's going to suck up a lot of paint. That would be my advice. Well, I really had a lot of fun playing around with these. This one took a while because I was working on this while also working on Lilliputian Living, my month-long inked art lore and world building challenge. So if you're into the tiny world, if you like, let me just be real with you guys, real. If you like flowers and you like mushrooms and you like tiny people and you like sewing and you like cute things and you like animals, you're going to love Lilliputian Living. So if this is the first time you've heard about it, I don't know what you're waiting for. Head on over to my socials, check out all the beautiful inked art, or you can pre-order a copy. Actually, I don't know when this video is going to come out, but it will probably still be in pre-order by the time this video comes out. You can pre-order a copy of book 2 of Lilliputian Living, Les Petits Plaisirs de la Vie, the little pleasures in life. I'll have the links down in the description below for you guys, or you can go ahead and purchase volume 1, book 1. So I get confused because it started out as a zine, and every year I released a different zine, and those are called volumes. But then we decided to compile it, the compendium of tiny living. We decided, or the compendium of miniature life, we decided to compile it into a book. So each book is 4 volumes. So that's why I get kind of confused like that. But 7-Inch Kara, my ongoing watercolor webcomic, which is also about plants and animals and tiny people, that goes by volume. So sometimes the ADHD just ADHDs really hard that day. But anyway, if you like my art, if you like my illustration and you're not familiar with my comics and my illustration and my prose yet, you should definitely check those out. The links will be down in the description below. I want to thank Arrtx yet again for sending me these to play around with, to noodle with, to experiment, and to share with you guys. Hopefully I have sparked inspiration for you guys. I could definitely see these being really, really fun for like custom Christmas ornaments, or to repaint Christmas ornaments in like a really fun way. I know a lot of model builders and gunpla people like acrylic markers. These could be kind of an affordable way to get into adding that to your existing gunpla and model stuff. Like, I can actually see a whole lot of uses for these kind of markers. Now, like as a watercolor artist and comic artist, usually my toys and materials, I can't use them for other things. I can't really extend them outside the world of making comics and drawing and doing illustration. These, I think, could have a lot of fun uses just to personalize things, to decorate things, or to work on like your minifigures, or to work on your Dungeons and Dragons minis, or to work on your models, stuff like that. I think there's actually a lot of cross application that Arrtx hasn't necessarily reached or started marketing to. I have a younger brother who is really into doing models, and I have a feeling I'm going to gift a set of acrylic markers to him because I think he could get a lot of use from it and really enjoy it. And they're much less expensive than the Tamiya markers that he likes and that are sold at the model shop. Those cost as much as Copics. as much as Copics used to in the real old expensive days. So I'd be curious to see how these compare to those as well. So if you're into models and you can give me a little bit of feedback, let me know that as well. So I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I hope this was helpful, useful, and informative, and definitely inspiring. Maybe you guys will try out one of the projects that I showed you guys today. And I am so sorry that the sun is in full force behind me. So y'all get to have fall, right? With like fall color and cooler weather and gray and drizzly autumn days. Louisiana fall is gorgeous. Louisiana fall is like 65 to 70 degrees, blue skies every day, the sun out in full force. It is beautiful, but it definitely is not good for recording indoors when you're using a window as a light source, right? So I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I hope to see you guys again soon. Let me know which of these projects you'd like to try down in the comments below, and I'll see you guys later. Bye guys!